We're following a lot tonight. This is a newsworthy week, from that big testimony last night to what's happening in Minnesota. We have James Carville here. But first, Americans are standing up to the Trump agenda and the ICE tactics caught on tape. In Minnesota, workers and businesses striking across the state, all to protest these ICE operations, which have ramped up. Americans braving below freezing temperatures. Okay, and you can see what we're having out there, exercising First Amendment rights, standing up. And I just want to be clear as you watch this, it's negative 10 degrees right now in Minneapolis. Meanwhile, people say, what do protests reflect? Sometimes they could be larger or smaller than public opinion, but here, the massive, strong revolt against Trump as we close the week comes with new numbers showing that people oppose most, if not all, of his agenda, and certainly the top items like how he's doing on Epstein or these ICE controversies. A year in, about half of voters say the country is worse off overall. When you say, okay, what about Trump's base? Are they saying everything's great? Actually, no. Many people who voted for Trump don't think we're better off, which is why only a third go that far. This is brand new New York Times polling that has Trump underwater by 16 points. And these issues show even more concern. This is when you look under the hood, it's actually even worse for the Trump administration and any Republicans heading into these midterms on Trump policies. On the economy, 60% disapproval. Trump is down bad. And this comes after the return from Davos, where he didn't get what he wanted. He backed down and did the very usual thing that foreign leaders and domestic audiences are accustomed to. Whether tariffs work or not, whether prices are down or not, Trump will, when he backs down, make a lot of bluster about claiming the opposite. But we deal in facts. However outlandish the plan was to use military force to seize Greenland, which he mistakenly called Iceland in Davos, he's not doing it. That's the back down. Then the bluster is trying to get headlines in right-wing media or elsewhere about how maybe he's still on his way to a hoped-for deal. But this is a reversal. And it's not only about the Greenland threats, whether we'd ever use force over there, but also what went along with that this week and rattled the markets. Trump's claims that he would have a long-term tariff war. If that sounds familiar, he's, of course, put out many such tariff threats and real tariffs around the world. This was about going after Europe. And it's brought back the talk of TACO, that Trump always chickens out, TACO. And this is rattling him as he shows in a format that some of his own former aides say is concerning, that whatever you think of Trump, that there is a decline. That's what Ty Cobb told us this week, as overnight he was posting dozens of messages that can only be described as unhinged, also threatening the New York Times for reporting on their polling that reflects the whole public turning on him. So met with bad news, he of course attacks the news, but you can't attack the hundreds of millions of Americans that are potentially reflected in that poll or out on the streets, revolting against many aspects of Trump in what has been obviously a bizarre week.
Donald Trump threatened sweeping new tariffs on some NATO allies unless Washington is allowed to buy Greenland,
saying he no longer feels an obligation to think, quote, purely of peace.
Now, Donald Trump says he's cancelling his planned tariffs for European nations.
Yeah, every one of them is a friend of mine. Couple I like.
The number of Americans who disapprove of President Trump is nearing a new high.
The people of the United States of America do not like what they see. They have issued a stinging rebuke of his presidency.
We are now starting with James Carville, a legendary Democratic strategist who follows these things very closely, but hasn't necessarily seen a week like this, not with maybe presidents you've worked for. James, what is your headline for the week, the polling, and these protests tonight?
Well, let's talk about Trump at Davos and his midnight nocturnal tweets. He's a flea-bitten dog baying at the moon. Okay, I apologize, kennel clubs and dog love area. I didn't mean to drag the reputation of flea-bitten dogs through the mud, but it's the best metaphor I can come up with. He's just howling and howling and howling, and you can't reason with him. Oh, that's 238,855 miles away. It can't hurt you. It's orbiting the Earth, and Earth orbits the sun. You're talking to a flea-bitten dog. I'm serious. It makes no sense, and it's going to continue to make no sense. And you can't figure it out, all right? And the big news, if you look at your story in Minneapolis, the Republicans are going to claim they're going to have a midterm mini convention with Trump attending. They're going to go to Minneapolis, and he's going to try to provoke a race war. Listen to me. This summer, the Republicans are going to go to Minneapolis. He's going to try to provoke a race war, and he's going to try to call out the 75th Ranger Regiment and declare.
And that's what you.
That's what. As soon as I saw that, and I saw the story today, he's going to go to Minneapolis to try to provoke these people in all over, and it's going to be summertime, and the weather's going to be good, and he's trying to create a race war. I don't think he will succeed because I don't think people will take the bait, but they better be warned. And I'm serious. I'm really serious when I put these two events together. I think it's really real.
Yeah, I mean, and people have to take these warnings seriously. There were warnings about enemies lists and autocratic slide or worse during the 24 campaign. And some observers, some people, I'm not talking right wing, some experts, media types said, oh, well, that's really rhetoric. And, oh, they're just saying these words. Everyone now is seeing it. And that's why when you look at about 60% of Americans opposing the ICE tactics, that's striking. You're saying something that overlaps with what we've heard from some former Trump aides, that he wants larger problems so that he can have them as an emergency trigger. I want to read from the Wall Street Journal, which was closely watching and at times criticizing this wild week that Trump had. The consequences are real. It's not just, quote, distraction. Europe, soldiers, markets. They write, Trump backed down from the demands to own Greenland. And he did so after the markets and European allies and the Congress raised objections. The, quote, authoritarian Trump narrative was wrong. Again, they argue. The reality is that despite his over-the-top rhetoric, he can't get away with whatever he likes. I'm curious, James, if you think that the Journal is referring to the problem. They certainly didn't like the market uncertainty, but they have it exactly backwards. It shouldn't take an entire coordinated world event to stop what were autocratic threats, starting a war without Congress.
Well, first of all, does anyone really think that Donald Trump could point to Greenland on a map? No, no one does. Secondly, he woke up one morning and he decided he just was going to say that. And then everybody, it was almost ridiculous. People said, well, this is not a very good idea. Maybe we could do this. And then, as Maggie Haven pointed out, what they're going to offer is sovereignty over U.S. bases, of which they already have. And he's going to announce, he's going to make great fanfare that he's reached a deal with Denmark and Greenland to do exactly what we've been doing for the last 300 years. That always happens with him. He comes nothing, fluffs it, and he comes back and he claims he's going to have this great victory in a place that he has no idea where it is. He has no idea what the history of it is, anything else. But that's just what we're in for between at least 9 November.
Yeah. I wanted to have you broaden out a little. The protests are important, and we've been showing some of that. They are backed, though, by a much wider revolt in this country, which is unusual this early in a second term. And they reflect what some critics are saying is the real loss of the consent of the governed. That we're not talking about a 5-point shift here about policy. We're talking about something deeper. I want to read to you more from that Times poll that's brand new that Trump attacked. Voters do not approve of the handling of the cost of living. That was the issue, of course, in the 24 race. By a 30% spread. Continuing, voters do not approve of the Epstein files, which are now an illegal cover-up, I can say that quite accurately, by 66-22. I mean, that's a lot of his base, James, that don't support. And then widening out even more to what scares Republicans on the November ballot, young and non-white voters, the Times writes, are likely to disapprove of Trump than they were, more likely now than 2020, but he retains support among the older white voters. Your view, James.
Okay, so on the Times poll and other polls, well, he wants to see the Times. Actually, the Times poll might have been a little bit better for him, slightly than the other consensus polls. But I'm going to be a little bit of a know-it-all political consultant here with your audience. The most important number in these polls is the strong disapprove relative to the strong approve, because that really, really tells you where it is. And I'm probably off a percentage point, but I'm generally not very off on these things. He has like a 24 strong approve and a 48 strong disapprove. So that is a huge differential. And you can just have to project yourself to November that the people who strongly approve, they're guaranteed to go out and vote. But the people that strongly disapprove, which are already approaching 50%, I'm not talking about somewhat approve. I'm just talking about strong versus strong. You know, mano, you line up, we line up. You know, it's 2-1 that he's in that deep, and he can sue whoever he wants to. But all the polls are the same. It's like my watch is not very different than your watch right now. It's all the same, and it's coming in. Always look at the strong approve, disapprove differential. It's something that a old campaign manager, first thing I would look at when, you know, it used to be that faction poll overnight or something. That's not like it is anymore, but that's how old I am.
Well, no, a lot of us look at polls as consumers. You looked at polls as a practitioner at the highest levels of presidential politics. So no, I appreciate, I think we all, that's one of the reasons we go to you is